What if I told you the most powerful version of yourself is hiding in silence? No applause, no audience, just pain, purpose, and a fire the world can't see. This isn't just a story. It's the truth most will never tell. Because behind every unshakable success is a man who once cried alone in the dark and kept going. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just be inspired, you'll be transformed. The night was quiet, too quiet. Street lights flickered above like dying stars. A cold wind scraped against his face, sharp as broken glass. The air smelled of rust, sweat, and something worse, regret. He walked alone. Each step echoed down the empty alley, like a question no one wanted to answer. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from memory. This was where it began, or maybe where it all came crashing down. He remembered their laughter, the way they mocked him when he dared to dream. "You will never make it," they said. "You are wasting your time." But he said nothing. No shouting, no proving, only silence and work, hard work. When they partied, he trained. When they slept, he studied. When they laughed, he bled. The hours were cruel, the failures endless. The voice in his head whispered, "Give up." But he refused. Not by words, by action. One night, his body collapsed on the floor. He could not move. His chest ached like something inside was tearing apart. Eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. He wondered if this was the end. No spotlight, no applause, only silence and pain. But then he saw it. Not a light, not a sign. A memory. His younger self. Hungry, barefoot, standing outside a window, watching others eat. He remembered that boy's eyes, filled with questions, filled with fire, and that fire still burned, not in noise, not in praise, but in purpose. He crawled back to his desk, hands shaking, heart pounding like thunder trapped in a cage. He opened his notebook and wrote one more line, one more plan, one more dream. They still do not see him. They still do not know. But that is the point. Real power does not scream. It does not beg for attention. It builds. In silence. Behind closed doors. In sleepless nights. In bruised hands. And blistered feet. Because one day, the silence will break. And when it does, they will not know what hit them. They will stand frozen. Mouths open. Eyes wide. Whispers racing through the crowd like wildfire. Where'd he come from? How did we not see this? But he will say nothing. Not out of pride, but because the moment does not belong to noise. It belongs to every silent second he endured, to every morning he woke up when his body begged to rest, to every evening he worked while the world watched movies, laughed, wasted time, to every sacrifice no one ever saw, to every time he bit his tongue when mocked, smiled when bruised, kept going when broken. His silence was never weakness. It was the chamber where strength was forged. It was the cocoon where purpose grew wings. It was the shelter that kept him focused while storms of doubt raged around him. He never needed to speak, because his results would. Louder than words, sharper than insults, stronger than any hand raised against him. But before that moment, before the curtain rises, before the world finally sees, there is still the dark, the cold, relentless dark, the kind that gets inside your bones, where hope feels like a lie, where dreams feel like weights, dragging you deeper instead of lifting you up. He sat in that darkness, alone. Only the hum of the old fan above him and the soft scratching of pen on paper kept him company. Each breath felt heavier than the last. His back ached, his fingers cramped, his mind screamed for relief. But he knew, this is the moment most give up. This is the line between the ones who only want it and the ones who will die for it. He leaned forward, eyes burning, jaw clenched so tight it felt like it might crack. And he wrote again, trained again, practiced again. Not for a post, not for applause, not for approval, but because he owed it to himself. He remembered the day he promised his mother, that one day she would never have to cry again, that the roof would stop leaking, that the bills would be paid without fear, that the shame would end. She never asked for anything, but he saw the tired lines under her eyes, The silent prayers before each meal. The way she smiled just to keep him strong. That smile was fuel. Even when he wanted to scream. Even when every bone begged to break. Even when he could not remember the last time he felt joy. He remembered her smile. And it kept him going. Silently. Relentlessly. Like fire under ice. Like thunder hiding in clouds. He knew the world did not care. It moved on quickly. It cheered the winners and forgot the rest. But that was fine. He was not doing it for the world. He was doing it for that one chance. That one window. That split second where preparation meets opportunity. And when that moment came, he would not panic. He would not hesitate. Because he would be ready. The world loves sudden success. But it never sees the scars under the suit. The sleepless nights behind the smile. The lonely years behind the fame. They only see the surface. But beneath that surface is a war. Fought in silence. Won in silence. Every champion you see today. There was a time no one knew their name. No one cared. No one believed. And that is what he became. Another ghost in the crowd. Another shadow in the corner. Until the moment he stepped into the light. And by then, it was too late to stop him. Because he was not driven by ego. He was powered by purpose. He understood something most never will. That silence is not emptiness. It is discipline. It is focus. It is patience with fire inside. And those who learn to work in silence, they build something unstoppable. Because when the noise fades, and the lights go out, and the crowd moves on, only the silent ones remain standing, still building, still rising, still burning. That is where greatness lives. Not in the spotlight, not in the noise, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching, and you choose to keep going anyway. He looked in the mirror that night, the same cracked mirror he had stared into every day for years. This time he saw something new. Not a broken man, not a tired face, but a storm, controlled, ready, deadly. He smiled, not because he had made it, but because he finally understood. He never needed to shout. He just needed to finish what he started. And when he does, the world will not just hear him. They will feel him. They will feel him in their bones, in the tremble of their hands as they scroll past his name, in the hush that falls over the room when his work plays, in the shifting of their hearts when they realize he was always there, in the corner, in the silence, in the grind. While they talked, he built. While they doubted, he endured. Every rejection carved deeper lines into his soul. Not lines of defeat, but lines of fire, of focus, of refusal to be forgotten. The silence was a sanctuary, where his chaos was tamed, where his pain became pattern, where his rage became rhythm. He remembered the cold floor, the one he slept on when the bed was too far a luxury, the flickering ceiling bulb above him like a slow heartbeat, the wall so thin he could hear the world moving without him. Success felt like a myth, like something that belonged to others. But still, he rose. He rose because he had no other choice, because surrender was not in his blood, because giving up was not a language he spoke. The silence taught him that. It taught him how to breathe when there was no air, how to walk when there was no path, how to fight when there was no cheer. He trained his mind to see beyond failure, to see through disappointment, to see himself not as he was, but as he would become. He saw the stage before it existed. He heard the claps before they started. He wore the victory in his mind every day. Like armor, he bled into his craft. Every letter, every lift, every line, every fall, it all had meaning. He embraced the grind that others ran from. He welcomed the pain that others feared. Because in the silence, there is clarity. There is no audience, no distractions, just you, and the weight of your own promise. And he had made one, a silent vow, that one day, the world would not just notice him. They would feel his presence like gravity. So he stayed quiet. Let others shine for now. Let them chase the applause. Let them confuse noise with success. Because he was not building a moment. He was building a legacy. One that would stand long after the noise faded. One that could not be shaken by opinion. One that would echo in places even his name could not reach. But it came at a cost. The nights of no sleep. The meals skipped, the holidays missed, the birthdays forgotten, all for one dream that lived in silence, that breathed in shadows, that grew in his chest like a second heartbeat. There were days he broke, days he screamed into pillows, tears streaming, wishing the burden would leave. But it never did, because greatness does not come gently. It arrives only when you are ready to bleed for it, to starve for it, to be laughed at, ignored, misunderstood, and still keep going. He remembered walking to work in torn shoes, each step biting into his heel, rain soaking through his shirt, cold turning his fingers numb. People passed without a glance, but he did not care, because he was not walking for them. He was walking for the fire that silence had lit in him, a fire that burned so hot it no longer needed air. It fed on purpose, on will, on belief when no one else had it. And now the world is about to see. But they will not understand. They will say he is lucky. They will call it sudden. They will try to explain it with words like fate or timing. But he will know. It was not fate. It was not chance. It was the cold mornings, the aching bones, the empty rooms, the silent screams, the invisible hours, the relentless silence. He will not raise his voice. He will not point fingers. He will simply arrive, fully formed, fully focused, unshakable. And when he does, everything will change. Not because he said it would, but because he became what he promised. And all of it, every step, every bruise, every lonely night, was written in silence, built in silence, born in silence, because that is where true power lives. Not in the noise, but in the quiet, where warriors are made, and kings are crowned, long before the world ever sees the throne, where the throne is not made of gold, but of grit, where each jewel is a scar, each step toward it, a story soaked in sweat, and every inch earned, not given. He did not come for approval. He came to conquer the parts of himself that once whispered, "You are not enough," because that voice, that whisper of weakness, had lived with him longer than any enemy. It spoke to him in the darkest hours, in the space between dreams and despair, in the silence where no one could hear him scream. But he answered it, not with argument, not with noise, with action. Every push-up when his arms trembled, every book read when his mind felt numb, every rejection letter hung on the wall like a trophy, not as defeat, but as fuel, proof that he was still in the fight, still moving forward. The world tried to distract him, flashing lights, quick wins, empty promises, but he learned to say no, to comfort, to distraction, to shortcuts, because he knew shortcuts steal the soul of a dream. They carve out the struggle, the sweat, the soul, leaving only a hollow success that crumbles at the first storm. He wanted something real, something eternal, something earned in such a way that even if the world took it all away, he could rebuild it, brick by brick, because the foundation was not outside of him. It was inside, built in the lonely hours, in the face of mockery, in the hunger, in the loss, in the silence. He remembered when he stood at the back of the room, invisible, watching others shine, wondering when his time would come. The sting of being overlooked, of being the afterthought, of hearing people say, "He has potential," but never giving him a chance to prove it. So he created his own chance, in the background, away from the noise, where no one believed, except him. And that belief, that stubborn, wild, unreasonable belief, it grew like a weed in his chest, refusing to die, even when watered with failure, because the soil was rich with purpose, and pain was the sunlight, and silence was the rain. He never posted about the nights he went hungry. He never shared the times he doubted everything, because some stories are too sacred for the scroll. They are meant to be felt, not flaunted. And in that feeling, he built discipline, not motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline stays. It wakes you up when the alarm breaks. It moves your feet when your heart is heavy. It reminds you who you are when the world forgets. He became the man who does not flinch, the one who does not quit when the camera is off, the one who performs whether cheered or cursed. Because real growth is invisible. It is in the choices no one sees, the words you do not say, The times you keep going when everything says stop. He remembered sitting in the dark, notebook open, dreams bleeding onto paper like open wounds. He wrote not because anyone would read it, but because it reminded him he was still alive, still in the game. And over time, those pages became plans. Those plans became habits. Those habits became him. He transformed in the quiet, in the hours between midnight and dawn, while the world slept. He sharpened himself, until he no longer bled doubt, but dripped determination. It was never about talent. It was never about timing. It was about fire, the kind that refuses to go out, even when buried under failure, the kind that lights the path forward, one step at a time, even when you can barely see where it leads. And now they ask how he did it. They want the secret, the formula, the hack. But there is none. There is only the silence he chose to walk into, to stay in, to become. Because the silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of self, the place where the world falls away. And all that remains is your will, your breath, your reason. And when you find that, nothing can break you, because you have already been broken and rebuilt, stronger, wiser, untouchable, not by fame, not by praise, not even by pain. He knows now. Success is not loud. It does not beg to be seen. It arrives like a storm, born from a whisper. And when that storm hits, there is no warning, no explanation, only impact, only aftermath. He will walk into that moment, not with a roar, but with quiet eyes and a steady heart, because he does not need to say, "I work for this." He is the work. He is the silence. And now, the silence speaks for him. It speaks through the strength in his spine, the certainty in his gaze, the stillness in his breath when others panic. It speaks through the way he stands, rooted, like a mountain that has withstood storms no one else even saw. People feel it before he says a word. The gravity, the calm, the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles, won in the dark. He walks into rooms and shifts the energy, not because he demands it, but because he earned it. This is what silence built. Not just skill, not just strength, but presence, real presence, the kind that cannot be copied or faked. Because while others curated appearances, he cultivated substance. He did not just learn how to speak well. He learned when silence says more than words ever could. He learned when to let fools talk, and when to let success echo louder than arguments. The world still tries to distract him, still tempts him with shortcuts, with fast fame, with hollow praise. But he has already lived without any of it, and he survived. He does not chase comfort anymore. He chases growth, the uncomfortable, the unknown, the uncertain, because he knows that is where the next version of him lives. Not in safety, but in struggle. Not in applause, but in the silence after the clapping stops, when only your soul can tell you if it was worth it. He remembers the faces of those who laughed, the ones who smirked when he said he had a vision, the ones who dismissed him with a wave, who said, "Be realistic," who said, "That is not how the world works." And he thanks them now, not with sarcasm, not with revenge, but with quiet acknowledgement, because their doubt was fuel. Their disbelief was his mirror. It reflected what he refused to accept: mediocrity, surrender, silence without substance. He chose a different kind of silence, one that worked when the world rested, one that trained when the lights were off, one that planted roots so deep that when storms came, he did not break. He bent, learned, adapted, and grew stronger. That silence built more than success. It built him, and in becoming unshakable, he became unstoppable. The funny thing about real progress is that it is invisible. You do not feel yourself changing until one day you no longer recognize the weak version of yourself you used to be. One day he woke up, looked in the mirror, and realized the man staring back at him had everything he once prayed for, not because of luck, not because someone handed it to him, but because when no one believed in him, he believed anyway. When no one clapped, he still performed. When no one called, he kept showing up. When no one noticed, He kept building, brick by brick, day by day, in silence, in solitude, in suffering. The world celebrates results, but he knows the truth. The real prize is who you become along the way, the version of you that cannot be shaken, because it was never built for approval. It was built to last. Now they ask him to teach, to share the secret, to explain how he made it. And he could talk about routine, discipline, focus, but it would not be enough. Because the truth is, what made him is not something you can see. It is something you have to live. You have to feel the hunger in your stomach. You have to watch birthdays pass while you are at work. You have to sit alone at the desk while others sleep. You have to sacrifice things that once defined you, to become someone who never needs to be defined by anything again. You have to choose the pain, choose the boredom, choose the grind. Not once, not twice, but every single day. When no one is watching, when quitting would be easier, when no one would blame you for stopping, but you keep going. That is the difference. Not talent, not connections, not even opportunity. It is the decision to endure, to keep walking through the fog, even when you cannot see 10 steps ahead, to move anyway, to believe anyway, because you know something others do not. That silence is not the absence of success. It is the crucible that creates it. He walks with that truth now. He does not need to prove anything, because what he has built is unbreakable, made not from noise, but from nights no one will ever see, from tears no one will ever hear, from moments so dark. He became his own light, and now he burns, not to be seen, but because he is fire, and silence was the match, and that fire, once lit, could never be extinguished, not by failure, not by heartbreak, not even by time. It lived deep within him now, a quiet blaze fueled by every memory of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. He no longer feared the silence. He respected it, because it was there, in the deafening stillness, that he found out who he truly was. Not the version they wanted, not the version that fit the mold, but the raw, relentless, unfiltered self. The one forged in early mornings and late nights, in sore muscles and sleepless eyes, in pages filled with ideas no one clapped for, in sweat-soaked shirts and meals skipped to buy books, in days where the only reward was survival. The silence became his sanctuary, a temple of transformation. While others ran from discomfort, he leaned into it, let it stretch him, break him, rebuild him. He did not chase balance. He chased growth. And growth rarely looks like balance. It looks like chaos, like collapse before clarity, like setbacks that feel like failures until you look back and see the lesson. He embraced every part of the journey, the embarrassing beginnings, the stutters, the missteps, the nights he whispered to himself, I do not know if I can keep going. But he did, not because it was easy, but because the pain of staying the same hurt more than the pain of changing. And now, the silence he once feared, it follows him like a shadow of purpose. It is in his posture, in the way he listens more than he speaks, in the way he sees through excuses, in the way he recognizes his younger self in the faces of those still hiding behind doubt. He wants to reach out, to tell them, I know it hurts. I know it is hard, but do not run from the silence. Run into it. Because on the other side of that quiet struggle is the version of you that no one saw coming, the one who no longer needs motivation, because he has built a foundation on self-trust, the kind of trust that says, no matter how dark it gets, I will find a way through. He remembers the time he had nothing, no praise, no help, no roadmap, just a dream, and silence. But he learned to make the silence his ally. He learned that work done in secret bears the sweetest fruit, not because others finally admire it, but because you know what it cost. You know what it took. And that knowledge, that memory of the climb, it stays with you forever. He walks past his old apartment now, the one with the leaky faucet and the broken heater, and smiles, not because he escaped it, but because he survived it. He remembers the nights where hunger made his hands shake, when the cold curled around his spine like a warning, when the dreams in his notebook felt further than the stars. He remembers crying silently into his pillow, so no one would hear, because weakness, he believed then, had no place on the path to greatness. But now he knows the truth, that weakness is not the enemy. It is the doorway, and silence is the hallway that leads you through it, step by painful step. He does not glamorize the journey. There was nothing glamorous about it, only grit and grief, and the stubborn refusal to die with his potential still locked inside him. People ask him now, "How did you stay so committed? How did you keep going when no one cared?" He answers with a smile, "I stopped needing them to care. I started caring enough for both of us." That shift changed everything, because when you no longer need validation, you become dangerous. You move different. You speak less. You do more. And the silence that once mocked you, it becomes your proof. It becomes your weapon. It becomes your legacy. He no longer explains himself. He no longer lowers his vision to match others' comfort. He just walks, moves, builds, because the noise will come. Eventually, the applause, the interviews, the headlines, but none of it matters, because the real reward is already his. He earned it alone, in the dark, with no audience, just a mirror, and a decision, and that decision, to keep going when no one else believed, to trust the silence, to work through it, to build in it, to become it. That was the moment everything changed, because he realized something that day, something few will ever understand, that the silence was never empty. It was full, full of answers, full of strength, full of the version of him the world was not ready for. And now, the world listens, but he no longer needs to speak, because every move he makes, every breath he takes, every room he enters, says the one truth he always knew. Work hard in silence, and let the silence make the noise. And now that the silence makes the noise, it echoes louder than any shout he could have given, not through words, but through undeniable presence, through eyes that have seen too much to blink, through hands that have built more in solitude than crowds ever dare to dream in daylight. He walks like a storm contained, not wild, but deliberate, not desperate, but determined, because this is not the end. This is not the destination. This is only the next chapter in a book he is still writing, one line at a time, in moments no one will see, in rooms no one will enter but him. And that is what makes it sacred, because real growth, the kind that breaks you just enough to remake you, does not happen in front of an audience. It happens in the dark, when the applause is gone, and only your reflection remains. That reflection no longer shows the doubt it used to. It no longer blinks in the face of pressure. It stares back with certainty, not because the journey was easy, but because every obstacle became a brick in the path. Every scar became a map. Every failure became fuel. He used to chase milestones. Now he chases mastery, not for recognition, but for peace. Peace in knowing that no matter what the world thinks, he is becoming who he was meant to be. Day by day, choice by choice, he lives by different rules now. He does not compare. He does not compete. He creates. He builds. He becomes. Because the man who works in silence does not look sideways. He looks forward, focused, obsessed, not with applause, but with alignment, not with status, but with substance. He sees through noise now. He has been behind the curtain. He knows the difference between fame and fulfillment, between hype and hunger always wins. The kind of hunger that cannot be satisfied by praise, the kind that only grows when things get quiet, when the world stops watching. That is when he truly comes alive, because he remembers how it felt, to be invisible, to be underestimated, to be the name they never remembered, the one they skipped over, ignored, laughed at, but he never forgot. He carried it with him like a secret weapon, like armor no one could see, but he could feel with every step. They fed him silence, so he learned to feast on it, to grow in it, to let it shape him into something they would one day have to reckon with. And now they see the results, the transformation, but they do not understand the cost. They see the mountain, but not the climb. They see the fire, but not the sparks that started it. He does not explain it to them, because they would not understand. This journey was never for the crowd. It was for the man he promised to become, the one he owed everything to, the boy who believed when no one else did. He honors that boy every day, by showing up, by pushing forward, by refusing to let comfort win, because the world needs fewer performers, and more builders, fewer talkers, and more doers, fewer people seeking attention, and more people earning it quietly, through relentless action. He remembers what it felt like, to question if any of it would work, to wonder if the sacrifices were worth it, to feel like maybe they were right, and he was wrong. But he kept moving, not because he was sure, but because quitting felt like a death he was not ready to die. And that decision, to keep going in the absence of certainty, changed everything. Now he does not ask for permission. He does not wait for applause. He does not explain his fire to those still playing with sparks. He just works, still, silent, steady, because some storms are not meant to be heard until they arrive. And when they do not ask for attention. They take it. His silence no longer hides him. It defines him. It is the anthem of his journey, the rhythm of his discipline, the melody of his mission. And now, when people speak his name, they do so with pause, with respect, with wonder, because they realize he did not need their spotlight. He became one that shines through consistency, through character, through courage built in the dark. And that is what working hard in silence truly means. Not staying hidden, not staying small, but building something so real, so undeniable, that when the world finally turns its head, they are left asking, asterisk, where did this come from? Asterisk. And the answer is simple. It came from the silence, the struggle, the solitude, the work. It came from the moments when no one believed, no one watched, no one clapped, and he showed up anyway. And he will keep showing up, because the journey never ends. Not for those who work in silence, not for those who build from within, not for those who understand that real greatness, the kind that lasts, does not speak before it is ready. It listens, it learns, it grows, and when the time comes, it rises, not to be seen, but because rising is what it was built to do. Because rising is not an act, it is a result, a consequence of every step taken in the shadows, of every morning he pulled himself out of bed while the world still slept, of every late night when his vision blurred from fatigue, but he kept going, because to stop then would have meant betraying the man he promised to become. And now, each movement he makes, each word he chooses, each breath he draws, it all speaks of that promise, not loudly, but powerfully, in the kind of way that cannot be taught, only earned. He does not celebrate like others do. There are no big announcements, no fireworks, just a quiet nod to himself, and then on to the next, because this journey is not about a finish line. It is about evolution. He knows now that every time he broke, every time he fell, every time he failed, he was not losing. He was building something unshakable within himself. And that something, it is what people feel when he walks into a room. They do not always understand it. They just know. He has been through something. And he did not just survive it. He used it. Used the darkness like paint. Used the silence like canvas. And created something too strong to collapse. Too real to fake. He still remembers those moments of doubt, when his fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen, when the silence in his room felt like a verdict, like the universe itself was daring him to give up. But he typed anyway, wrote one more line, lifted one more weight, took one more step, because he knew, even if no one else was watching, he was, and that was enough. He did not build this life for the applause. He built it for freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you are willing to bleed for. They say you find yourself in the quiet, but he did not just find himself. He forged himself. He shaped a man out of pressure, out of pain, out of persistence. Now when he speaks, people listen, not because his voice is loud, but because it carries weight, the weight of integrity, of experience, of someone who has been to the bottom and chose to climb. He is not trying to inspire you. He is trying to show you that the life you want, the future you dream of, is not out there. It is inside you, buried beneath excuses, hidden under fear, waiting in silence. And the only way to find it is to work relentlessly, faithfully, privately, because one day that silence will speak. And when it does, the world will not just hear your name. They will feel your story. They will feel every lonely hour, every empty pocket, every time you sat in a dark room and chose your dream over sleep. They will feel it, because what is built in silence moves differently. It hits deeper. It lasts. He is no longer asking for anything. Not recognition, not permission, not opportunity. He creates his own doors now, walks through them without knocking, builds paths where none exist, because he has lived long enough in the shadows to know the light is not given. It is earned. Every time you say no to distractions, every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you hold your vision steady, while the rest of the world loses theirs, you earn another brick in the foundation. And one day, you will stand on that foundation, tall, silent, unmoved. While others wonder how you did it, you will know the truth, that it was never one big moment. It was thousands of small ones, invisible to the world, but everything to you. It was every time you chose discipline over doubt, every time you stayed in the fight a little longer, every time you whispered to yourself in the silence, asterisk, I am not done yet. Asterisk, because you are not here to impress. You are here to express, not to compete, to create, not to win by their standards, to define your own. And that is what working in silence really means. It means you stop waiting for someone to validate your worth. It means you stop needing the world to believe, because you already do. You show up whether they clap or not. You move forward whether they notice or not. You keep building, because the reward is not the recognition. The reward is the transformation. The reward is becoming the kind of person who does not quit, the kind of person who stares into the silence, feels the weight of doubt, and chooses to go deeper, to build in the quiet, until one day, the quiet becomes impossible to ignore. That is where he stands now, not above anyone, but beyond excuses, beyond fear, beyond needing anyone else to believe what he already knows, that silence is not emptiness. It is preparation, and he is ready, always ready, because when you work hard in silence, you do not fear the spotlight. You just no longer need it, because when you no longer need the spotlight, you become something more powerful than visible. You become inevitable. You stop chasing validation and start commanding respect without saying a word, because the energy you carry is no longer borrowed. It is earned, and people can feel it. They feel it when you speak softly, but with authority. They feel it when you walk into a room, not trying to be seen, but impossible to ignore. They feel it in the calmness of your demeanor, in the way you are unshaken by storms, unbothered by noise, because you have weathered storms that would have drowned most, and you came out walking, soaked, bruised, but stronger. You no longer flinch at failure. You no longer panic at rejection. You have heard no so many times. It has become your rhythm. You dance to it now, because every rejection sharpened your resolve. Every setback deepened your strength. And every moment of silence, where no one answered your calls, no one replied to your messages, no one showed up for you, you showed up for yourself. You kept the promise you made, when no one else was around to witness it. That is what built you. That is what shaped the muscle in your heart, the steel in your spine. And now, they want to know how you became this version of yourself. They want the blueprint. They want the recipe. But they do not want the silence. They do not want the early mornings, with no guarantee. They do not want the lonely nights, the invisible progress, the grind that no one celebrates. They want the results, but not the roots. But you built the roots first. Deep, anchored, unshakable. And that is why the storm never moved you. You have become the quiet force, the kind that never needed to prove itself with noise. Because when you know your worth, you do not have to shout it. You carry it, in the way you move, in the way you speak, in the way you stay centered when the world spins out. They ask if you ever doubted yourself. And your answer is yes. 1,000 times yes. But the difference is, you did not let the doubt stop you. You let it sculpt you. You let the fear speak. Then walk forward anyway, because you realized something most never do. That courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to obey it. And every time you refused, you grew. You hardened. You rose. And now that you stand where others said you never would, you are not interested in revenge. You are not fueled by bitterness. You are fueled by memory. By the memory of the nights that taught you who you are. By the silence that demanded your growth. By the weight of the work that no one else could carry for you. So when they see you now, and they wonder where it all came from, you smile, because it came from the one place they never looked. Within. It came from that small, forgotten corner of the world, where you planted your flag in the dirt, and declared war on the version of yourself that was willing to settle. You built your empire not with bricks, but with moments, thousands of unseen, thankless moments, that no one will ever clap for. But they built you, and now the applause feels small, because you know what it cost. You know what it took, and the truth is, the reward was never the applause. It was this quiet knowing, this peace, this fire that no longer needs to be fed by recognition. It burns on its own now, because when you work hard in silence, you reach a point where you are not trying to impress anyone anymore. You are simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. And that kind of becoming, that kind of transformation, can never be taken from you. It is yours, earned, worn, lived. It lives in your choices, in your habits, in the way you rise early when others sleep in the way you train when others relax, in the way you hold your standard even when no one is watching. And when people finally notice, it is not to say, "Look how loud he is," but rather, "How did we not see this coming?" And that is the power of silence. It builds in shadows, it grows in private, and it arrives like thunder, sudden, but never sudden to you, because you were there for every moment, every painful rep, every missed opportunity, every hard choice. You were there when the silence mocked you, and you silenced it with effort. Now your silence is not a void. It is a presence. It walks before you, and speaks louder than noise ever could, because you worked hard in silence. And now the silence works for you. It follows you like armor. It protects your peace. It humbles your power, and it reminds you that your greatest strength will never be how loud you are, but how long you kept going, after the world went quiet. So now, as the world leans in to listen, as the noise begins to rise, as the recognition finally arrives, you do not change your pace. You do not chase the crowd. You simply nod and keep walking forward, because this journey was never about being seen. It was about being real. And you have become just that, through every lonely mile, through every unseen effort, through every battle you fought when no one was watching. You are not the result of applause. You are the result of endurance, of patience, of purpose. So to the ones still in the silence, do not run from it. Do not rush to escape it. Let it shape you. Let it sharpen you. Let it strip away everything false, until only what is true remains. Because if you stay long enough in the silence, and if you work hard enough within it, there will come a day when your presence speaks louder than your voice ever could. And on that day, you will not need to announce yourself. You will not need to explain how you got here. You will simply arrive, built by silence, defined by discipline, and driven by a fire no one else could see, but you always felt. Work hard in silence. Let your success speak the rest. And when it does, the world will listen.